All right, thank you very much for having me here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own career journey in technology. I do not have strictly a robotics background, but yesterday during dinner, people were talking about how communication networks is one of the key things that are lacking in robotics, and this is where my area is. As was introduced before, my career spanned industry and academia back and forth, and I'm not going to here pretend it was all part of a grand plan or a long-term agenda, basically. It's just what happened. So a little bit about me. I'm a reader in computer science. I co-lead a research group called Computer Science for Social Good. Over the years, even though my main expertise is communication networks, I've been working or started working more on the intersection of internet, measurements, computer networks, Internet of Things, security, privacy, law, user experience, design, AI, ML. So as I've been exposed to more projects, I've become more interdisciplinary. And how did I get here? I mainly followed the opportunities. As I said, I'm not going to pretend it was all part of a grand plan. And I tried to keep my enthusiasm about learning new things. And I collaborated with others. I think this picture is very much representative of my career as well. At times, it felt a lot like climbing an ice mountain. This was taken during a trip to Iceland. I booked the trip to go over ice walking on black ice, and it turned out like a curveball thrown to be climbing an ice mountain, which I didn't sign up to. Equipped with these tools and a lot of support from the coach, I did it anyway with a smile, but still thinking, how did I get here? So a lot of the times in your research career, you can find yourself in situations like this. And I try to never leave my enthusiasm behind and try to do it anyway. It all started in Istanbul, Turkey. I come from there. My bachelor's is in control and computer engineering from Istanbul Technical University. This is a university that has only technical subjects, so it's all engineering. And it's a program that doesn't exist anymore, but what it taught me is getting me embedded in electrical engineering, electronics, control theory, lots of hardware, because that was the expertise of our department, microprocessors and all that. I started specializing there on computer networks, and I decided for my undergraduate project to do a project with the National Institute of Research in Turkey with the Center of Cryptology. And this is one of the things that I kept doing over my career, always trying to find a project that would push me beyond what is expected from a bachelor's thesis, for instance, in this example. And I tried to find stakeholders that would be interested in the outputs of my project beyond my supervisor, basically. So I did the project. I met a researcher there that was just coming from the United States, which planted the idea in my head that there is something called Google for research, and as well as there is a possibility of doing studies in the United States. And that's what I did next. I got a Fulbright scholarship and went for a master's degree in the United States in the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, from a very busy city like Istanbul to the cornfields of Champaign-Urbana. It's a huge change. And I started working on a topic called wireless mobile ad hoc networks. And these networks were inspired by being able to connect any device anywhere at any time without relying on an infrastructure. That was a time where there was a lot of research being done on Wi-Fi and trying to do on-demand Wi-Fi-based communication was a very interesting idea. There were applications in disaster areas. These devices could be attached to humans, or they could be attached to robots, or they could be attached to any other device, and you would want to create an ad hoc network there. And I started working on how to communicate in those multi-hop networks efficiently, and how to conserve energy because they are battery operated. How do you guarantee longevity in these type of networks? In the United States, when you're doing your PhD, first I started with a master's. You're expected to take courses. So I ended up doing more courses than necessary, but each course that I have taken, I pushed for projects and collaborations. I ended up publishing 3 papers during my master's from just the projects I've done during the courses. And then during my PhD as well, focusing mostly on networks, but at the same time, I nurtured my interests in security and filling the gaps of my knowledge in operating systems. So the first lesson I learned was that collaborate and invest in your interests. Although you might be hired for a project that is not necessarily feeding into your direct interests, do that work, but do additional work as well. Nurture those interests. Be interested in talking to people, working on problems with them, and create new projects. So I've led kind of my research agenda, even though I worked for my advisor as well. And my first academic paper ended up being on security, not my main research project. And we tried to understand how an attacker leaves traces on an operating system, correlating information from multiple different places. This was for the first time I was using AI/ML techniques, and I ended up learning a lot, but left it there as a side, still continued doing my PhD project. Funnily enough, my last paper is on security as well. So this is what I mean by you might start doing projects, they may never take the main place in your life, but at some point, having a broad set of interests that you work on, it could be that they take the place of your main projects. And my last academic paper on security looked at a much more interdisciplinary field of understanding how children navigate dark patterns on the internet. And this was, for the first time, I collaborated with a psychologist, basically trying to understand the mental models of children, looking at various different dark patterns that they're exposed to and how they react to them. Okay, so first lesson, nurture your interests, listen to your instincts. After my PhD, I went to do a postdoc at INRIA. This is a national research institute, very much like my experience during my undergrad. And I started working on something called delay-tolerant networks. I don't know if any of you heard about delay-tolerant networks, but this was mainly something that was pushed by Vint Cerf, who's one of the fathers of the internet. And it's about interplanetary internet, trying to get devices do internet when connectivity is intermittent. They don't have always access to connectivity. And this is what is called delay-tolerant network. Even if you don't have connectivity at all times, could you still do TCP, for instance, right? So that was the idea. And I did the project. And I still continue to work with other researchers in the lab that I was hired in INRIA, in Saclay. There were other researchers that looked at security, so we started looking at security as well. And again, a side project turned to a main project. I did publish in my main area, but also with those collaborations, I ended up doing a number of other papers on different topics. So one of the lessons, again, that I learned is that breadth and flexibility and allowing for opportunities was very useful. Okay, so far it was an academic career, and you will notice as you go out of your PhD, sometimes postdoc opportunities have very short contract times. So INRIA was a one-year contract. The moment you land, you start to be productive, you end up looking for your next job, right? And at that time, this opportunity opened that was calling for a longer contract, and it was for 2 + 4 years. So you're hired for 2 years at the beginning, but then if everything goes well, you get a renewal of a contract for 4 more years. So I thought that really looked cool. And previously, when I didn't have any real direct interaction with a telecom, but my PhD research was funded by Vodafone. So I ended up presenting to Vodafone during my PhD research, but not necessarily contributing to a direct project from Vodafone. Still, I felt that experience was kind of opening me up to this opportunity as well. So I went to Deutsche Telekom and became part of their strategic research team, but actually, if you look at industrial laboratory environments, when you look at research and development R&D, depending on the time, the influences, the politics, the budget, how much R and how much D is there changes a lot. Okay, so there is sometimes little R, a lot of D. There is sometimes you have the luxury to do a big R and maybe a small D. But there's always a D, basically, development. And I welcome that opportunity because I wanted to do something, again, a little bit touching reality. And I ended up being part of building a mesh network over the rooftops over Berlin campus in Technical University of Berlin. And this was an operational network. It did serve internet to the campus, but at the same time, as researchers, we kind of used it as our playground. We, at the time, did a lot of publications around how to build testbeds, actually, so that you can have live traffic, but at the same time, lots of configurability in the network so that you can flash new protocols, flash devices completely, start from scratch, use almost the testbed as a simulator while having live traffic in the network. So we did do lots of things there, but it was messy. So, and I think it was touched on before, is that sometimes you work months and months in something and it turns into a 10-minute demo. I worked on building lots of demonstrators during my time in Deutsche Telekom, and I ended up presenting from customers to clients to anybody, to the public, just want to see what does Deutsche Telekom do in terms of research based on these demonstrators. So I would have stayed. I had my 2 years. I got my 4 years renewed. I would have stayed. I would have done more messy stuff, even though some of the visitors that we had to the labs thought systems research is a career suicide. Their take on is for academically, again, you do lots of years of work, but then what is publishable may be very little. And then it doesn't necessarily match the timeline of sometimes master's and PhD students and when they have to graduate and when they have to produce something. As well as from a company perspective, company moves sometimes very fast, and what might be interesting at some point needs to be replaced very fast with something else. So in both sides, people said, oh, systems research, it's really a career suicide. But I really enjoyed it, and I think we found a sweet spot. But then I got married. So my husband found a job in Queen Mary as a professor, and we moved. So I started, that's why I said when I said about the career is something that you kind of find as you navigate different factors in your lives. So for the first time, I was a dependent because as a family member of an EU citizen, now that won't work because that Brexit happened. But I was a family member of an EU citizen. I worked remotely for Deutsche Telekom for a while, but thought I should find something here to do, so I started working for Oxford Brookes. Again, this transition happened because my job allowed both publishing papers, but at the same time patents. I had experience with the telecom, as well as even though it was not within my job responsibility, in Technical University of Berlin, I created courses that used our testbed with undergrad students. So all of that experience could be translated back into saying, look, I did have enough experience to teach in an academic institution, from creating courses to grading to creating assessments and etc., as well as guiding PhD, master's, and undergrad students. So I tried to keep my options always open for both types of careers wherever I was. With Brookes, I started creating, because the department was very much interested in robotics-related research. There was Phil Tor, who later joined Oxford, and there was other initiatives in robotics. I started looking into more Internet of Robotics things. And I was working with China. I was traveling as a researcher to Beijing University of Post and Telecoms. You can say I was in a good place, but then I received a call from a recruiter who said, we're looking for somebody that would have experience with Internet of Things for a company that is thinking of a little bit expanding their product portfolio in this area. Would you be interested? I was. So I thought it's a good, and this doesn't come very often, right? These are the time points where sometimes opportunity just pulls you and you have to follow. This was where I was not pushing, I was listening to a pull. So I went to the interview, it went really well. And this company was called Nominet, and it actually runs the DNS for the UK. It's the UK registry, official UK registry. It's a company that talked to me a lot because it was a not-for-profit company that was interested in doing very cool new innovation. And I thought, in essence, it's really, really interesting. And throughout my career, I always wanted to do the following. Even though I didn't have a very long-term agenda of what I wanted to do, I always tried to remember what I stood for as a person, what talks to me, what am I interested, what type of research I would like to be involved in. And this was kind of ticking all those boxes. So I started working with them in that research. Well, I cannot call it research anymore. There was a lot of development and very tiny research. The job description was like, we will try to come up with different products that we will prototype very fast and see whether there's a market for it and whether we can launch different things within the company. Even for a not-for-profit company, they were really wanted to diversify their product portfolio. I ended up being involved in projects in Oxford, like Oxford Flood Network, for instance, to try to understand whether there was an alarm condition due to the flooding of the rivers and etc. So there was lots and lots of development, and I really, really enjoyed it. At the same time, again, my idea of not closing myself to opportunities and always thinking beyond what my current job responsibilities ask from me, I decided that I want to go into standardization a little bit more, because we were doing lots of work that could be standardized and that could be specified for other engineers to implement. I decided to pitched the idea of going to IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, which kind of does the standards for IP, TCP, UDP, all the internet standards. So I said, why don't we go there? We're working a lot on protocols that make these constrained systems more secure. Can we just go to the working group and contribute? And my boss allowed us to do that. So my co-author is now in Oxbotica, which is a self-driving car business. But we both pushed this idea. It took us 6 years to get from an idea to a recognized standard. It went beyond my career in Nominet. I was already out of Nominet, but I started doing long-term things there, even though it wasn't my number one job responsibility. And I continued pushing for wider impact in the sense that I wanted to make sure that whatever we are doing, I could use any opportunity at work to be able to do that. And this was one of the other opportunities that were presented to me. So because this was a not-for-profit company and this wanted to teach technology to children, it had a relationship with microbit.org. So I ended up looking at what we can contribute and decided that there's not many resources that teach children networking, and I know networking, so why don't I use that? And this is actually became one of my most impactful projects because the resource has been translated into many different languages and used in code clubs. So in summary, I went back and forth in academia and industry, did a lot of development, but at the same time I tried to keep my options open. Within the industry, that experience makes you a better educator because you see what's happening in the real software engineering kind of groups. But at the same time, I pushed publishing. I pushed experiences that I could still go to a university and say, this is all I have done, which is relevant to your business model as well. In academia, I became unique to industry because my other perspectives allowed me to create or pitch projects that my bosses wouldn't have thought about, but still would have brought prestige to the company. But I needed to constantly upskill myself to learn new things and sometimes just eat the humble pie and learn from people that, they rank you as a director or a senior researcher, but you learn from a new starter, for instance, and be ready to learn from anybody. And eventually, the career is full of turns and twists. If I may give you an advice, follow your instincts, collaborate. Collaboration is the key, and listen to advice, but don't act on all of it. I leave you to decide what you take away from this talk. Thank you.
We have time for one question, if there's any. No? Yeah? So I have a question. Do you have any regrets?
Sorry?
Do you have any regrets?
Do I have what?
Any regrets?
Regrets about leaving anywhere? No. I actually welcomed every opportunity with full on, so no. And I'm very happy to be here. I was joking that every 4 years I switched between an industrial position and academic, and this is my 4th year at so yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, very quick one. You worked for industry, but they were basically industry with a big R, as you said, right? So to retain the publishing track record when working for industry seems very hard. So I've seen a lot of people who have had this ambition, and there's relatively few places that seem to be really supportive of that.
So let me clarify this. Deutsche Telekom gig was definitely with a big R, and I got bonus for publishing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But Nominet gig was a very small R. I actually did it all in my spare time. I published single author papers of my own as well, based on my research interest. Again, with the permission of my bosses. You don't do anything that is, in office time. that is not going to be. But I said, I'm interested in this and I'm interested in that. And I think I am able to push it further for a research venue as well. They would be interested in the D part, and R part is, yeah, why don't you? Okay, fine, as long as it doesn't interfere with anything. So for those type of places, it has to be very much self-driven, basically.
Thank you very much. Thank you.